Hi everybody, this is Snowy from Indigenous Rising. I had a request asking me to do a tutorial on pine nut necklaces, how to make them. And I'm going to start by telling you the steps, and then I'm going to try to break it down for you. Step 1, gathering. This is when you go out and you find your pine cones. Inside the pine cones are the pine nuts. I do my gathering in late summer. I go in July, August, and September. I'm in Northern California, so it's still really warm in September, and I can't speak for wherever you are. Know your climate, know when it's hottest. That's when you're going to want to go pine cone hunting, gathering. And when the pine cones are really hot, when they're exposed to, summer weather, they open up like a flower blooming. And inside those petals, as I call them, that's where the pine nuts are. Excuse me. That's where the pine nuts are. And you can hold your pine cone upside down and shake it, and the pine nuts will drop out, and you'll gather them. I like to keep the pine cones because I cut off the petals, and when you cut off the petals from the pine cone, you're left with what looks like an eaten, used corn on the cob. It looks kind of weird, but it can be cut down and then made into really beautiful pendants. And a lot of Maidu people, I'm in Maidu country right now, a lot of Maidu people and Nisenan people use those cores, those pine cone cores, for pendants on their pine nut necklaces. I have one as an example with me right now. Here is a pendant from a pine cone core. They're beautiful, and they're all unique and different, and they kind of look like a sun, and I really love to use them, and it's more traditional to use them also. The next step would be sanding them down. Now, the supplies you'll need to sand down your pine nuts are obviously pine nuts and sandpaper. And try to get the most durable sandpaper you can afford. The flimsier sandpapers are going to be destroyed after 5 pine nuts, give or take. So I get the really durable kind. I got this one at Home Depot, and it was inexpensive, at least in my opinion. And what you're going to do is you're going to sand down your pine nuts hot dog style. And I'm going to explain that for you in just a second. Here's a pine nut. The pine nuts are a teardrop shape. That means it's narrower at the top and then expands in an oval kind of way. And you're going to want to sand where my fingers are. You're going to sand at the top of the teardrop, and then you're going to sand at the wider part at the bottom. And I'll demonstrate that for you for right now. Sorry, I'm trying to get it on webcam the right way. So you're going to sand that way, and then you're going to turn it upside down and sand again. You're going to sand until you see holes on both sides big enough to fit a paper clip through. When it's ready for a paper clip, it'll look like this. Here's a pine nut that has the holes on this side and on this side. And it can fit a paper clip through it, which is actually important because you're going to be using a paper clip to clean out your pine nuts. Here's a paper clip that I unfold. This is how I use mine when I clean out my pine nuts. The paper clip can fit through this one, and that's important because you're going to use this paper clip to push out the things that are inside this pine nut. Now, what's inside the pine nut is a white meat substance. It's not meat like animal meat. It's meat as in a nut meat. And that was actually eaten by the Maidu people, the tribes around Maidu country and Nisenan people. I've had it my whole life. It's bitter sometimes, and when pine nuts are baked, they're really good. I'm not suggesting that you eat it because I don't know where you've gathered, whether they're safe to eat or not, from pesticide spraying and whatnot. I really don't know if it's safe for you to try it, but I've always done it. But anyway, I was just trying to give you some history on the Maidu people would actually eat it and then use the beads for their necklaces and even more ceremonial attire. Maidu women would use pine nuts to make what we would call a wedding gown. So if you can imagine thousands of these little pine nuts in a dress, T-shaped dress going down, very gorgeous. I've only seen a few in my life, and a lot of work, and I'm talking years. Traditionally, the Maidu women and their grandmothers would help them make a dress, or their mothers would help them make this dress for years before they considered getting married. Years before it was time for them. So for us, more modern day Native people, imagine starting your wedding dress at 13 and using thousands of pine nuts to make it for when you're old enough, maybe in your 20s or 30s, to get married, or whenever you choose to get married. I don't care what age you are when you get married, but imagine being younger and starting to make your wedding dress. That's the tradition of Maidu women. That's one tradition, excuse me. And I wanted to share some history and background with you. Anyway, so that was step 2 of sanding down your pine nuts with the use of sandpaper. Now step 3 is cleaning, and I've already demonstrated for you how to do that, and I jumped ahead, I'm sorry. And that is using a paper clip unfolded and pushing all the white meat out of your pine nut. It'll take a few minutes to get it all out, and here's a really great tip for you once you get the white meat out. Don't just throw it away, and maybe don't eat it, or do. That's up to you. But what you can do with that white meat, it's actually really oily, so you can rub it on your fingers or just rub it directly upon your pine nut, and that way your pine nut is going to have like a really shiny glaze. It's really beautiful, and it's a natural way to do that. Without the use of, clear nail polish, or if you want to stay away from more modern products, that's a great way to go. And it's more of a sealant. It seals the pine nut from deteriorating for a little bit longer, and it's a natural oil, and it's really pretty. The next step would be putting a pendant on your necklace. And there's different ways to do that. There's what I would call a loop knot, which is a little different from a traditional loop knot. And then there's also using metal rings, opening them up with 2 different tools, and then again closing that once you have the pendant on. Here's an example of some abalone, which is a traditional shell that's used on pine nut necklaces here in Maidu country. This one has a metal ring that I had opened and already closed on it, and that way it'll hang flat and not to the side when you put it on your necklace. Also, I want to show you how to do what I call a loop knot, which is not the traditional way of using a loop knot, but I actually Googled it, and I think the military have their own version of the loop knot. So I'm kind of weary of saying loop knot and offending people, saying like, oh, that's not really a loop knot. So whatever you want to call it. Here's a piece of synthetic sinew, and I put the ends together and used my fingers to meld it into place. And the really good thing about sinew and synthetic sinew is the oils from your hand can make the fraying pieces meld back together, and that only lasts for so long, and eventually sinew does deteriorate, which is why I mostly use wire when I make my pine nuts now. If I make a traditional pine nut necklace, I use synthetic sinew. Anyway, so here's my pieces put together, and here's a piece of abalone that I drilled with a Dremel tool. I don't have my Dremel tool in this room right now, but you can Google it, buy them anywhere, Walmart, Home Depot, wherever. Anyways, this one has a hole drilled in it, and I'm going to show you how I do it. I put the 2 ends through, I put the 2 ends through the hole. I'm going to pull it until the loop is almost gone. I'm going to stop right now because the loop is getting smaller, and I'm going to put my fingers through the hole, grab those 2 ends, and then pull them out, pull it down, and then you have a pendant that hangs flat, as opposed to just going through it without a knot and then having it hang like that. You want it to hang flat. So that's my version of a loop knot. I'd also like to share some information with you on different types of pine nut necklaces. And I think I showed you the one that has the pine cone core, and that's my more traditional style pine nut necklace. It has leather backing, which means I punched a hole in it and then added the strands and tied it with a knot, several knots in fact, and it looks more like this. This one has, excuse my voice, this one has no shells on it. This is all glass e-beads and pine nuts, and then with a pine cone core pendant. Here's a necklace that has shells on it. It has not an abalone, it has what looks like abalone pendant, and then it has dentalium shells on it. Now, dentalium shells are used very commonly on pine nut necklaces here in Maidu country and Nisenan area, and there's a story behind that, and I'll share with you what I was told since I was a very young girl. The dentalium shells and the pine nuts had fallen in love, and that's the story I grew up with, but that their affair ended sadly, and they parted ways. And because of that, the Maidu people, when they make pine nut necklaces, they don't have the dentalium and the pine nuts touching each other directly. They have them spaced out by beads. These ones are not touching directly. They're divided by beads. And so if you're going to try to do it the more traditional Maidu way, I would divide those two pieces. Also, another tradition, Maidu tradition, is when you put dentalium shells on your necklace, the wider part of the dentalium shell, as you can see, it's narrow at the top and then expands just slightly at the bottom. The sides that are wider need to be facing down towards your feet. And if they're the wide part facing down, that is a representation of life. And if the wider part is up here, facing upward, it represents death, and that can be offensive to Maidu people. Again, that's if you're doing a Maidu style pine nut necklace. I just wanted to share that bit of information with you. I've made traditional to somewhat traditional and then up to modern style pine nut necklaces. My more modern style pine nut necklace looks like this. It has a regular pendant. I got this one at Michael's. And then it has both glass and plastic beads, and then pine nuts. But the more traditional way of making pine nut necklaces is using dentalium and pine nuts, and the cores from the pine cones, actually. So I hope that tutorial helped you guys out. If it doesn't, please let me know, and I'll try to make a better one where I physically do the steps for you. So give me some feedback on that, everybody. I'll see you next video. Thank you for watching.